Therapist perception.
Hello and welcome back to Reactivity TV, which is where Catherine and I give our therapist takes, our therapist perspectives to all of the trending shows that you are watching on TV. And today we have a bonus episode where we are talking about Ted Lasso because season 3 just wrapped. We just had the season or maybe series finale.
Series. Is it not series?
It's undetermined. They're leaving it open for now.
Oh,
so,
yeah. Interesting.
Very much so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it is an ending for Ted, for sure. But if it's an ending,
they're going to have Ted Lasso without Ted,
perhaps, or maybe they'll do a spinoff or something.
Okay.
There were lots of hints to that. You know, it's not about Ted Lasso; it's about the Richmond way.
Wow. Good point.
So yeah, I mean, let's dive right in. This was a finale. What it was a finale of, we don't know, but it definitely did do a good enough job to like, that could have been the end. It really could have been. It was a goodbye to the show, it seemed.
You're right.
So
yeah.
What did you?
Well, I kind of was thinking of breaking down some of the reactions I had based on the characters. I don't know what you were thinking.
Yeah, I have a similar theme, and then just like overall themes that I kind of noticed from the episode and from the show itself.
Okay, cool. You go first.
I guess I just started to think about goodbyes in general and how like this week in particular, like we had the Succession series finale. We also had the series finale of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I don't know who watches that. There was also the series finale of Barry, which is on Max or HBO. So there were like a lot of endings happening, plus Ted Lasso. And I was just kind of thinking about how like this finale compared to Succession and just how it was satisfying in a different way because it really tied up all of the loose ends, and it did a really good job of kind of like calling back to things from the first season and things like that, which was, as a viewer, kind of nice to see. But I guess I was thinking about like with goodbyes, like, and we talk about this a lot in therapy, termination, that it is such a good opportunity for us to have a chance for repair in terms of goodbyes. A lot of times when people leave, we don't have this opportunity to truly have space to process and to grieve and to mourn with the person before they go. And that was something that I really appreciated in watching this is Ted tells, Rebecca and tells the team, and they have time to kind of savor that, to talk about the impact of Ted on their relationships and vice versa. And that is so mimicked in what we see in therapy a lot. Again, ideally, that's how termination goes. That's what goodbyes look like, because again, they can be so reparative. And then it just made me think a lot about Ted in general and the ripple effect of Ted, that he came in and he was this like overly optimistic, endlessly optimistic and positive person. And he believed in everyone, like the power of belief and the power, again, of these relationships. And again, it made me think a lot about therapy, and the gift of therapy is the power of a relationship, that a relationship can actually change your brain. It can help change who you are and how you are. And that's what we see happen for Ted. Like it really was the Ted Lasso effect in a lot of ways. That we see the way that his impact, his love, his care for every single person that he came in contact with served them so well. Like we see Rebecca's growth, we see Jamie Tartt's growth, Roy's growth. Like it was just beautiful. And again, I just thought it did such a good job to show the healing power of a really positive and supportive and nurturing relationship. Yeah.
I mean, this is such a feel-good show, and that was such a feel-good analysis of those aspects. I mean, the goodbyes in general, and the goodbye, you're right that like he has such a positive impact on everybody around him, and they got to, I mean, we got to like look back on that with them as they said goodbye to him, and that was really nice to see. And that doesn't always happen. Like we had this instance earlier this week with Succession, and a not so feel good show where maybe we're satisfied, like you and I said in the other Reactivity TV episode, but we're not feeling all that good about it. Whereas this was like tied up in a nice bow. Mm-hmm. And if we're comparing things to therapy, I mean, we also talk about all the time how a lot of the times things don't get tied up in a nice bow. I mean, ideally, somebody goes through the therapeutic process and gets to a point where it's a mutual agreement between the therapist and the client that we've reached a point now where this can end, and rather than just a cutoff or somebody kind of sliding off or something like that happens pretty often. Mm-hmm. And that also happens just in real life in general, where we're not always so prepared and so like nurtured into a goodbye. Mm-hmm. Whereas when we would like to, even in things that we expect, like people graduating from college or people graduating from high school, or like these big milestone endings where they're coming, but you're not necessarily like given this big wraparound hug around it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, gosh, I have so many thoughts about even what you just said. One thing that I found was really interesting about the goodbye part of this is we didn't actually see Ted tell them. Like we saw what happened after, which I thought was interesting, but you're right. Like we rarely get closure, which is again, like why it can be so transformative because it so rarely happens. But just like the juxtaposition between Succession finale and Ted Lasso finale. And again, we're looking at the two patriarchs, right? And like the way that Logan Roy fathered his kids directly relates to how they end up. Like, and the same is true for Ted. And gosh, like if those Roy boys had a Ted Lasso in their life, things might have looked a little less bleak at the end, but it's not a crossover.
Also, speaking of crossovers, it didn't occur to me, and maybe I'm just super clueless when it comes to like faces. Did not occur to me that Rebecca's mom is the mom in Succession until this last episode of Ted Lasso. I was like, wow.
Right, like she tracks across series. But I know I just talked about Ted. Like, who else kind of were you thinking about in the finale?
Well, I actually have something about Ted that I wanted to say that isn't as heartwarming.
Go for it.
So I just wanted to point out his decision to return home and how it really didn't even come into fruition until his mom had pointed out to him in the episode prior about how his son really misses him and really needs him. And yes, Ted has been like longing for his son and wanting to be a part of his life. And at the same time, he's been totally across an ocean in a totally different country and hadn't had enough of a pull before to go and be an active participant in his son's life in a way that he knows would be most effective and helpful. Mm-hmm. And so I know that at the same time that he was pulled into this job and pulled away from his family, that it was also like this nice escape for him and this nice way for him to physically remove himself from his environment that was getting really challenging. His wife wanted space, wanted a separation, and then they eventually got divorced when he was away in London. And so I think there was a little too much of an emphasis on Ted needs to get over his relationship before he can father his son. Mm-hmm. And I just had a really hard time with that. Mm-hmm. In that here's his son who has nothing to do with his parents' relationship and is needing his dad for the last 3 years, mm-hmm. and his dad hasn't been there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
No, I hear you on that. And I think, I guess I'm holding the empathy for Ted. Like the previous episode was maybe not one of my favorites, but one of my recent favorites. That dialogue between he and his mother in the kitchen was incredible. I loved mm-hmm. that. And I think just like having the understanding that Ted had a father who died by suicide, and that it never got talked about and never got addressed. And it clearly impacted him. Like, I'm imagining Ted's optimism. It's obvious in a lot of ways, a defense mechanism, right? Like, he didn't learn how to talk about feelings. We see that was like his season 2 journey. And so what he says to his mom is, I'm scared to get close to him. And so in a way, it feels like he's trying to protect himself and his son from disappointment, the disappointment that he felt as a boy, not like having a father really let him down in such a big way. And yet, like, there is a selfishness to that, right? Because like everything tells us that like kids thrive like when they have like their parents around, positive parental support. But you're right, like there was that little bit of selfishness, and the other characters have questioned that, like, why are you 4,438 miles away from home? Like, you didn't need to get that far. You didn't need to, have that much space between you two. So you're right. Like, that wasn't a great look, though I can understand how Ted rationalized making that choice.
Yeah. I understand how he felt like he could have needed it. But I think, I'm just empathizing with his son too much.
Yeah. That's nice of you. Little Henry, somebody's got to think about him.
Yeah. But another character that I just wanted to talk about a little bit more was Rebecca. Mm. I don't know if you have anything on Rebecca.
No, go for it.
Okay. So I'm like, I think I said to you right before we started, like, I'm going to try not to critique the show while I still kind of pull apart some of what I saw going on. Since that's not what we're here to do, even though, like, come on, they couldn't have just made this into 2 seasons because they just tried to squeeze too much in too little time. Like, don't make an hour-and-a-half episode, make it another episode and make another season. I don't know. That just really bothered me. They just tried to clear up everything. Okay. I didn't say that. So, and I really love the show. The show, like, it is so heartwarming and it's so funny and like, okay.
we know it's okay. It's okay.
So Rebecca had her own journey, as many of these characters did throughout this season, where, that one instance where she saw the woman who's like an intuitive or a
psychic,
and this psychic totally pressed a button when she told Rebecca that she was going to have a baby. And we don't know, Rebecca's past with Rupert too much, or just in general with like any of her fertility journeys or wanting a child. But clearly from that interaction, you just knew that, okay, that's something that she always wanted and didn't get to have. And she was already thinking, like, I'm past a point where it's now possible. So screw you for bringing it up and like throwing it back in my face. So I think that there were instances throughout the rest of the season where she was trying to uncover, or like she saw those moments that, oh wait, wow, maybe that psychic lady was right. Like, wow, here's this sign with this matchbox, and oh, that man that I used to date just said the words in a wrong order. Like, now, okay, maybe there's some validity to what this woman was saying, but she still wasn't truly an active participant in how can I make this happen? She went to the fertility clinic. Okay. Found out from the doctor what she had already thought. And I don't, of course, like, I'm not going to knock her for, all right, did you want to adopt a kid? Like, your decision is your decision for what you actually want to do in having a child. But it seemed like she kept wanting this baby, this child, and yet there wasn't a lot of, like, we just weren't seeing that a lot. We weren't seeing how she was missing it, and she was really at a loss. And instead, what we kind of were seeing more so was her throwing herself into what she did know. And what she did know was how to be a boss ass bitch. And like, she was really throwing herself into the game, throwing herself into the ring with all these men and showing them what she can do and how she can be on top. And she does that so well. And yet it seemed like this escape tactic for her to really get away from, okay, if I can't have this other thing that I don't know if I'm entirely looking for in all the ways that maybe I do want it, because then of course in the end, when we do see her, you know, go and comfort this girl that just tripped and happens to be the guy that she met in Amsterdam. Yeah. That was the click for her all along, was she just needed this connection rather than this effort to go find that herself. I don't know. It just was all like happenstance rather than like her putting in the work to get there.
Yeah. No, I have two thoughts are coming to my mind. One is like the only inkling we get around like her fertility journey or maybe her wants in terms of motherhood is when Rupert tells her that Bex is pregnant, and she had said, but I thought you didn't want kids or something like that. And so it seems like, again, like maybe she had just deferred completely to what her husband wanted. But what you're kind of talking about in terms of like, just kind of giving into all of these signs, it reminded me of like manifesting or horoscopes. And like those things are great, like manifesting in particular, like it's great to visualize things, but like you've got to put in the work as well. Like that's not enough. And it was such a callback to, I think it was also the first season when Rebecca's talking with her friend Sassy and says, you know, I just feel so bad. I've been absent from yours and Nora's life for 6 years. And he really locked me in this ivory tower. And Sassy, what a good friend she is. Because she said to her, yeah, but you climbed every step up there into the tower. And that, I loved that accountability there, because it does feel like, yeah, on the one hand, like Rebecca is a boss ass bitch. Like, damn, she is amazing. But then there's like this level of like passivity to her of like, oh, just like, I'll go with where the universe wants to take me. And yeah, I wonder about that dichotomy there. And maybe that more of the maternal side is more of an insecurity for her. And that's why she doesn't pour into it in the way that she does in being a franchise owner.
Yeah. What else were you saying?
I guess I wanted to talk about Roy a bit. And a couple of things, a couple of episodes ago, or maybe it was the last one, they're all jumbling together now, but when he put on the tie-dye shirt that Phoebe gave him, I actually like got tears in my eyes. I was like, oh, this is big for Roy. And so we've like definitely seen his, along with, you know, so many other, like Jamie is like another character who had such a great arc, but particularly Roy in this last episode, he becomes a diamond dog, like, and they're all so happy that he's there. And he asks such an incredible question around change. Is it possible actually for people to change? And it is like a big question. I mean, of course, I'd love to get your take on that, although I'm sure I know what it is. But what I loved was it is kind of a nuanced answer. And the thing that I loved about the kind of discussion that they were having and like the wisdom of Higgins is like, like fundamentally you can't change who you are, but you can evolve into just a better version of yourself, but you have to put in the work. And, you know, the thing about change, and again, I guess I'm relating it a lot to therapy today, but like in order for people to achieve change, they have to believe that they can persevere, like that they have the strength to get through challenges. And sometimes that's hard to hold. And that's like where a therapist can be really helpful. Like we like eternally have that hope for people. But like change does require some sort of belief and some sort of work on yourself, like to make that progress. And so the change only can come mostly from you. And of course can be amplified by like the community and others that are part of your circle. And then what do we see at the end and kind of the epilogue is that, you know, Roy sits down with the therapist, Dr. Fieldstone, and he's putting in the work. And I thought that was awesome to see. This guy who was like just grunting and swearing at the beginning and now is like looking for some introspection, some insight, and really seems motivated to be a better version of himself, which I love to see it.
Yeah. Which he was already putting in that work. And like, obviously we saw it, and the team of coaches even saw it, but he hadn't seen it. And like that often happens too, where you're late to the game and catching up to where you've come to, unless you're either doing that self-reflection or you're doing the work in therapy, or you are talking to your support system who gives you that feedback. Sometimes it can slip by you, especially if you're thinking it's a means to an end, where it seemed like, okay, is Roy just putting in this work so he can get Keely? Okay, no, it's actually so Roy can be a better Roy. Mm-hmm. And even that was like one of his first intimate questions with the coaches was like, how do you know if a girl likes you? Mm-hmm. And then he totally rejects them when they call out the Diamond Dogs. He's not ready for that. But then when he is ready, he makes it more about him rather mm-hmm. than like, how can I change somebody else? Mm-hmm. Or how can I know about somebody else? Like, how can I know about me? Mm-hmm. Which is a huge change.
Yeah. Yeah. Love Roy.
Yeah, me too.
Love that journey for you, Roy.
Yeah. But speaking of Roy and Jamie and Keely, as much as, I was rooting for Roy during this whole season to sort of just like, I guess not win Keely back because he's the one that broke up with her. But anyways, like for the two of them to be together, I was definitely a team Roy if there are teams. But I really appreciated how after the two of them, after Jamie and Roy came to Keely and were expecting her to make a decision on which one of them she wanted.
Oh, I get to choose?
Yeah. That was great. I love that she chose herself. And I think that we've seen so much from Keely in this back and forth with all of her partners that she has gotten so caught in these relationships. And yet she is really successful and she does work really, really hard for herself. And we still saw her time and time again choosing the people she's intimately involved with in her life. And I thought this was like a huge moment for her where she really rose to the top here. And yeah, I was like, I'm gonna pick me. Mm-hmm. And she does. I mean, we see in that little epilogue too, that she wants to create an AFC women's team and like has all these great ideas. And you just saw how like, oh wow, Keely's story wasn't really like, who are you going to end up with? It never was. Keely's story was, how can I become a better Keely? Mm-hmm. And just like everyone else's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I loved that too. And I like that frame that she did end up choosing herself and to reduce her storyline into, does she choose Roy or Jamie? Like just is so reductive because she was so much more than that. She brought so much more to the show than that. So yeah, that was awesome to see. And And one last thing I just wanted to point out in terms of Jamie, again, this episode was so great with the callbacks. And I actually caught this on TikTok. I didn't quite notice it in the episode, but like going from this totally like entitled, narcissistic kind of guy, so self-centered, to this generous team player. And the little touch I loved was in the first season, he was wearing a hat that said icon. And in the last episode, his hat instead said ICOG, COG, like a cog in a wheel. And I loved that. Like, what a perfect touch, because that is exactly what he became. He became a team player. He became the person that was comfortable, like with being the decoy. He was okay with like letting someone else share the spotlight, and just like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of thought. So I really loved seeing that. If you would have told me in season 1 that Jamie would become like one of my favorite characters, I would have never believed you. But that just seeing his transformation was awesome. And I also wonder if that also helped him even be open to healing with his father, like that, healing that relationship. Once he felt again more secure in himself and didn't feel like he needed to prove himself or be a certain type of individual, like that allowed him to feel more secure in building a relationship with his dad.
Yeah, that was really cool to see in that epilogue with him visiting his dad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yay, I love Jamie. Jamie taught.
Yeah, I was almost going to do the but I'll spare you. But yeah, we'll see. It was such a feel-good show. I hope we get another feel-good show coming our way soon, because that was really nice.
Yeah.
Well.
Oh, well, we kind of get it.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of get it with Shrinking. Same creators.
Yes. Same creators, yes.
I get the same similar kind of feels in that show.
I know. Maybe we should talk about Shrinking.
We should talk about Shrinking.
Yeah, I'm up for it. Well, let us know what other shows we should be giving our therapist perspectives or therapist reactions to. Maybe it's Shrinking. It'll be The Bachelorette, which is also coming soon, but there's so much out there as well. So let us know in the comments. And I guess until our next episode, so long, farewell. Bye.